everyone, and welcome to the official All Things Watched podcast. And this is our second official episode where we talk all things about all of the latest and greatest movies and TV shows and streaming and all that kind of cool stuff. And in this video, we are going to be talking about episode 1 of the newest chapter of the MCU. Phase 5, which of course is Secret Invasion. Now, of course, everything over here on the podcast is open spoiler discussion, so if you have not seen Secret Invasion, then I highly recommend you turn out of this podcast, go and watch the episode, and then come back, because I absolutely am going to ruin this episode for you. So if you want to watch the show spoiler free, do not listen to this podcast, go watch the show, and then come back and listen in. So this is your final warning. This is a spoiler review, a spoiler discussion. Once again, this is a spoiler conversation. Okay, with that out of the way, let's now jump in to Secret Invasion, episode 1. Now, this episode was titled Resurrection, and we get to see some of our favorite heroes come back, while also introducing some new cool characters into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We get to see the return of Samuel L. Jackson, who comes back to portray his character as Nick Fury. We get to see Ben Mendelsohn come back with his character, Talos, and we get to see Cobie Smulders return as Maria Hill. And of course, in the cast and in the credits, there will be a couple of other characters returning that we know, like Don Cheadle will be coming back as Rhodey. So that's really fun and really cool, and I can't wait to see Rhodey come back. But now I will say Rhodey is not in the first episode, but I will also say that even though he's not in the first episode, this series opens up with a bang, literally, especially at the end of this episode, which we'll get into in a second. But a couple of the new additions to the cast is we get to see Olivia Colman, who comes in as Special Agent Sonya Falsworth. We see Emilia Clarke come in now, and she's introduced into the MCU, who portrays a character known as Gaia. And of course, Gaia is actually Talos' daughter, all grown up. The last time we seen Gaia was, I believe, in Captain Marvel, which took place in between the two Avengers movies. So I believe Gaia was introduced in that film, but she was really young at the time. But so now she's sort of all grown up, and she portrays, and she is Talos' daughter, and she's actually a part of this the Rebel Skrulls, the Skrulls that are basically sort of evil, the ones that are trying to take over the world. Well, she's actually a part of that gang, but she sort of has a soft spot still for Talos. Talos in the very first episode tells her that her mom has passed away, which seems like it has a big impact on her. Seems like she's very disappointed, very sad, almost like she can't believe that her mother's gone. So I really like that. It seems like Gaia really felt guilty, I think, to some degree. And whatnot. So really loved Emilia Clarke's performance here. I was a little bit confused at times why they chose to give Gaia and Maria Hill, so Emilia and Cobie Smulders characters, they had the same hairstyle and it's almost the exact same color. So I was a little bit, I don't really know why they did that. They should have had them, I think, differentiated a little bit, even though Emilia Clarke and Cobie Smulders looks very different in the real world, especially like height differences. I believe Cobie is much taller than Emilia Clarke in the real world. I just felt like, having the same hairstyle might be a little bit confusing every now and again, and to me it almost seems a little silly to some degree, but besides the hairstyle, you can really look past that. This episode also introduces Kingsley Ben-Adir's character, and he's basically playing this Rebel Skrull. He's portraying the leader of these Rebel Skrulls that are trying to slowly but surely take over the world, and he's the leader. And he has a lot of different transformations in this first episode, and I really appreciated that. I really like that, I just really liked his character. I thought he's a very believable leader. But I think one thing that this episode did really well with the Rebel Skrull leader, Gravik, I believe his name was, Gravik, what they did really good with Gravik in this very first episode is they showed that this is a force not to be reckoned with. Ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between, the Skrulls are here in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they are here with a bang. Literally, in the opening episode, they plan on doing this crazy terrorist attack with 3 huge bombs to blow up a couple different areas, and the way that they do it, I thought was really, really amazing, really cool. It was just so much fun to watch. Now, I was very skeptical about this episode, about this show, because to me, Secret Invasion should be something that's on an Avengers level threat. Like, really, the Avengers need to come in here. But it seems like they're going to keep it a little bit smaller, a more smaller, well-grounded type series, and I can appreciate that, because after seeing the first episode, I actually loved it. I thought it was really good. It gives me a lot of hope, because we do know that behind the scenes, Marvel has been struggling. We know that, Disney has been forcing Marvel for all of Phase 4 and for a lot of even Phase 5 until now. In recent times, they've been telling Marvel, Disney has been forcing Marvel Studios to keep pushing out a bunch of work, but, finally Kevin Feige was given a bit of relief because of the guy that come back in to take over Disney again. He told, Feige to take his time, just make good content, because in the long run, good content, the quality of the content will greatly outweigh the quantity of content. So as long as it's done good, people will come back. And honestly, if this first episode is any indication, I do feel like Marvel is getting back to their old selves. Like I said, you still got to take that with a grain of salt. A lot of the Disney Plus shows really start strong, but this one, but then end up, losing their momentum halfway through, especially towards the end. Typically, I find the Disney Plus shows get worse as they go on, rather than better. But I have a lot of hope for this one. And I really think Secret Invasion could be, or has the potential to be, something really special. So that's the characters that are mainly in the first episode, which we talked about: Nick Fury, Talos, Maria Hill, Gaia, and the Rebel Skrull, Gravik. Now, there's other characters as well, but I don't feel like the other characters are going to be quite as big as what these ones were. Maybe Pagan, who's portrayed by Killian Scott, and whatnot. So, but it was really fun being introduced to these new characters and whatnot. And I really loved all their introductions. I really loved the introductions of the Skrull. And one thing that this show does really well is it really makes you wonder, who are the Skrulls? And after the first episode, they also show that the stakes are real. So let's actually get into the episode now, break it down a little bit, and talk about it a little bit, and see what happens in the episode. So first and foremost, when the episode opens, the Marvel logo pops up, and to me, it seemed like it's a brand new Marvel logo. It's a lot quicker now than what it was. So it was like they sort of start the traditional logo, but then they sort of cut it off with the Marvel Studios brand. So to me, it seemed like the logo was actually a lot quicker. Now, maybe that's just me, but maybe I overlooked something here, but I do think they have a new opening with their logo, and honestly, I kind of like it. Once upon a time, their logo would last like 30 or 40 seconds. It takes that like 30 or 40 seconds. Sometimes, I think a couple times, it was almost a minute for the Marvel Studios banner to show up. So I kind of like that they cut that down and made that a lot quicker. But anyways, the show begins, and actually one of the very first characters, literally the first character that we're introduced to, is of course Martin Freeman's Everett Ross. I forgot to mention Everett Ross is in this episode too, and I absolutely loved how he was in this episode. And he's basically, he goes to this place and he's having a meeting with someone who's basically telling him that the threat is very, very real. The guy is telling them, that the Skrulls have been on the planet now for the past 30 years, and they are becoming a threat. Now, later on in the episode, Gaia when Gaia, which is Talos' daughter, when Gaia introduces this new Skrull into their rebellion community, I believe Gaia actually says that there's 500 of them there. So that alone will tell you how many Skrulls are in the world now, ever since the past 30 years, since Carol Danvers and Nick Fury promised them that they would have a sanctuary, and that promised to help find them a new planet. I believe Gaia said that there's like 500 of them there now. So, I mean, that's a lot of Skrulls, especially when 500 of them can take any form, any shape. It seems to me like, if you have 500 Skrulls / aliens that have that kind of ability, it would not be too hard for them to take over the world, because they could take over key players of the world. They could take over world leaders. They could take over positions in the United Nations. They could take over positions in the World Health Organizations and all that kind of stuff. So, 500 Skrulls can do a lot of damage to the planet. But I think one other good thing that by Gaia telling us that there was 500, it also does a good job at grounding it. So rather than it being like millions of scrolls, which would be like an extreme Avengers event, she says that there's only 500 of them. So it doesn't, and I'm not saying only as in there's not a lot. Like we just said, you could take over the world with 500 scrolls. But what I mean is that 500 is probably more manageable than an entire, like an entire civilization, like millions or billions of them coming. So I think they did a really good job at showing how real the threat was, but while also keeping it small and grounded enough and believable enough to the point where people like Nick Fury, Kobe Smulders would be able to fight off this. Maria Hill, sorry, would be able to fight off this invasion if they maybe just attack certain key leaders, like like Gravik, the rebel leader. So, anyways, right in this opening scene with Everett Ross talking to this dude, right away they lay the groundwork of the entire season. Literally in this one conversation, basically they tell us what this show is about. It's about the Skrulls. They're here, but they're getting tired and fed up because they were promised a new planet by Carol Danvers and Nick Fury, but the Nick Fury and Carol Danvers did not deliver. They're promised this planet, well, not our planet necessarily, but they were promised a planet, and then when the time came, they did everything that they wanted. Nick Fury housed them, kept them alive, kept them secret here on the planet, but now, after 30 years, they're still no further ahead than what they were back in the 90s, because that's when Captain Marvel took place, was back in the 90s, so, and they're still no further ahead, so it seems to me like the Skrulls are just getting fed up with that, and they're saying, you know what, Gravik basically took over, and he's like, you know what, we need to fix this. It's time for us to move on. If they're not going to help us find a new planet, then what we are going to do is we are going to take over their planet, and that essentially, I think, lays the groundwork to the entire series. And honestly, it's a very compelling, very interesting story. So we get a really cool action sequence in. So after all this happens, of course, Everett Ross ends up leaving, but he ends up getting hunted down by another Skrull. And of course, once he gets so far, then we learn that he ends up getting killed by a Skrull. But what we learn is that Everett Ross himself was actually a Skrull undercover. So literally within the first, I think all this happens within like the first 8 minutes of the episode. So literally within the first episode, we're told what the whole series is about. The Skrulls are tired of broken promises. They want to take over our world. But it also does a great job at showing us things are not as they seem. It does a really good job at making you feel uneasy. This is a show that's actually creepy, but not creepy as in horror, but creepy as in who do you trust. It isolates every single one of our characters, and to some degree even isolates you, the viewer, because you don't really know what's going on either. And I thought that was quite genius in Marvel. Like I said, I was very skeptical about this show even working. One is the Disney Plus show, which honestly has not really been delivering, but two, I always felt like Secret Invasions was this huge worldwide event with the Avengers, but honestly I felt like they did a really good job at making it big, but also keeping it small, and honestly it really did a great job at pulling those emotions that you get when you read the comic, like who is who, because in the comic, the Skrulls do take over certain Avengers and whatnot, so it'll be very interesting to see, how they can move on with that in this one without having any Avengers or anything like that. But at the same time, I'm very interested to see it. Like I said, the Skrulls can still take over main leaders and whatnot, and it also seems like these rebellion Skrulls, which are led by Gravik, it seems like they are very organized as well. So not only is he smart and intelligent, but he's also very organized, and he really knows what he needs to do. The actual and whatnot. So then the actual opening credits roll, and this is about 8 minutes roughly into the story now. And as soon as the credits are rolled, then we get Nick Fury now coming back down to Earth from the space station that he was up on. I think they labeled that as Sword a couple times in some projects and whatnot. So when he comes back down to Earth, he is actually met there right away by Kobe Smulders' character, Maria Hill, and she's like, hey, welcome back to Earth. And I really like that dynamic that they have here, this exchange. They go back to sort of this safe house. Which is where Talos is. Talos is there, and Talos and Nick Fury are just kind of being buddies, and he's like, hey, I haven't seen you in a while and whatnot, but I really like the relationship that was going on between Maria Hill and Nick Fury as well, because you really, you can really feel you can really feel the tension that is between the two of them, because Maria is kind of like, well, you've been gone all this long, so the fact that you haven't communicated with me in such a long time really tells me how you feel, so to speak. So I really like that. But anyways, the three of them are really working together, Maria, Nick, and Talos, and they're basically trying to figure out why the Skrulls are here, and or not really why they're here, but where are they going to attack next and all that stuff. So that was really cool. We do get Don Cheadle is in this. He is in this episode briefly, I believe it is, just for one scene. I think it was only just one scene where he's talking. I think he was talking to the president. I can't quite remember now, but I'm pretty sure he was talking to the president. But then we're introduced to Special Agent Falsworth and her character. So she seems like she's going to be, I guess you could say, sort of the authoritarian figure. Like she's going to sort of help Nick Fury and Maria Hill and Talos with their investigation into the Skrulls. Seems like she's like the powerhouse. She's like the resources. She's like the part of the government that's going to help. At least that's the impression I get. I have no doubt in my mind that it's going to turn out that she's a Skrull or something like that. Hang on, I just got to take a drink from my voice. So I have no doubts in my mind that she's going to be evil, maybe towards the end. I could be completely wrong. Maybe she won't be, but I do feel like there's going to be, a really big, I do think that there's going to be conflict between them and her as the show continues and as we learn more about the story. I have no doubt in my mind that something's going to happen there. But they sit down and they have some really cool banter, really cool conversations as well. Both her and Maria Hill are both always talking about how Nick Fury is different now, ever since the blip. And they actually do a flashback in this show, too, which I really appreciated. They do go back to everything that happens after Avengers Infinity War. It does show Nick Fury disappear because of the blip, because of Thanos' snap. So that was another great way to keep this show completely independent and focus on the Skrulls, but while also sort of acting as a continuation from the Avengers. So I really appreciated that, because I have a feeling that as we learn more about the story as the show goes on, I don't know, and I never seen the second episode like a lot of people have. I don't have any special access or anything. I'm just hypothesizing here, but I have a feeling that it was in those 5 years of the Thanos snap when the Skrulls really started to take over. It's like, yes, they were in the world for the past 30 years, and I'm sure that they did start to take over even as far back as 30 years, but I feel like after the snap, that's probably when they really started to take over and take control. But I really liked how they really focus on sort of like the PTSD type thing with Nick Fury, because he is different. He's a very different person now than the last time we saw him. We're used to seeing Nick Fury as being this, let's go get him, let's call the Avengers, let's go, we do what we need to do to protect humanity and whatnot. Whereas in this series now, he's more, you can really tell that he's aging, but he's also more laid back now, and he's more, I don't really know how to explain how he's different. He's just not, now he's more like, well, I don't really have all the answers. And he used to be someone that was sure and he knew everything and how to do everything. Whereas in this one, it's almost like, well, it's exactly what really happened. He is defeated, which is exactly what happened in Infinity War. Is exactly what happened when they went up against someone like Thanos. And I think that's where Nick Fury is at this point in his life. He's like, well, what's the point of us even fighting when no matter how hard we try to fight, no matter how much we fight, in the end, we still end up losing, even especially to someone like Thanos. So I just really liked how they really went into that realm with this episode. I really liked how they had those conversations, how, you could really tell that Nick Fury has been changed by the experience that he had and whatnot. And so I was able to really appreciate that, because I feel like that was really, that was a very realistic component to the show that I think would really happen in real life. If you got snapped away by this alien force that invaded Earth and then, basically did defeat the Avengers, which are, Earth's last hope, last line of defense, I think that would take a toll on a lot of people. So I really appreciated that side of it. And then, of course, then finally we're introduced to Gaia, which is, as we already said, portrayed by Emilia Clarke, but she is Talos' daughter, all grown up now, basically, since we've seen her. And she's living over here with these, I think they call themselves the Rebellion. And one of the Skrulls ends up showing up here at the gate and basically wants to be sort of recruited by this Rebellion. So Gaia tells the scroll, well, I want to see you in your true form. So he takes off his hat, and while he takes off his hat, he shifts back into a scroll. He changes back. And I think, you can obviously tell that this was done for to save money. I'm trying to say, you can tell the CGI at times when they change is oftentimes you don't see it on the screen, but we know that that's because they're trying to save money. Obviously Disney Plus, is trying to bank a little bit of money. They've cut back a little bit. Not only that, but this is a Disney Plus show, so they don't have the same market or the same budget as what a big full-blown MCU movie would have, even though they're still a part of the MCU. But it didn't bother me because I understand in the real world that all that stuff costs money. But I do think some people will have a problem with it. The fact that they did cheap out on the CGI. I don't think they cheaped out on all the CGI. There is a full-blown transformation in this movie, or in this episode later on. And like I said, the special effects with the explosion later on when the bombs go off, that looked really, really real to me. So I didn't really mind the fact that a lot of the transformations of the Skrulls were, hidden. Maybe they walked behind something and then they were different. Or in the case of this, of the scene where Amelia is bringing in this new Skrull, in that scene, his face changes while his hat goes down around his face. So I'm able to forgive stuff like that, but I totally understand if you're someone that does get fed up with that. I totally get what you're saying there. It is frustrating sometimes, especially with Marvel, who has had some big $billion hits when they cheap out on their shows. And the quality of their shows. So what happens then is you really got to hope that their writing and their producing and their directing really hits home and really fires on all cylinders, so to speak. So, but like I said, I was able to forgive that, but I totally understand if you can't. But I was cool with that, and this is basically how we're introduced to the Skrull Rebellion. We're introduced to them through Gaia, who's Talos's daughter, and she basically lets him come in, and so they go in, and he gets into the gate and gets into a vehicle with Gaia. Gaia feeds him some sort of like flour type thing, or whatever it is, which is, specifically for the Skrulls. It's the type of food that they eat. So I thought that was really cool, and it was also really cool to me because of the fact that it shows that they are able to have that even here on Earth. And it seems like that Skrull has been starving for quite some time. He hasn't really been living on the type of food that they're accustomed to. So I really like the idea that she fed him, and also it's a great way to show a nice warm welcome. Oftentimes if you have guests or something come into your house, a lot of times people will, offer them tea and coffee or something to eat and whatnot. So I thought that was a really cool way for them to show this rebel base and show how warm and welcoming these rebels are to the people that are on their side. Because at the end of this episode, we're going to see them basically do like a terrorist attack and blow up a bunch of places, which also shows the cruelty of the Skrulls. So, amongst themselves, they're very warm, welcoming, very loving, kind, and caring. But, against the rest of the world and against society, who has constantly let them down over and over and over, they're not so kind. They're very cruel. So Gaia ends up driving the new recruit into the premises of where the rebels are hiding. And honestly, I really love that scene because all the Skrulls were there walking around in their true form. There's like a bunch of kids there playing soccer, kicking the soccer ball around. They're having fun. They're having a blast, and they're just being themselves. And then when they actually get into the facility, like inside, we'll say, then then you see what looks like Skrulls and humans mixed, but really what it is, it's just the Skrulls have taken their human form. So it just sort of shows a combination of both, which is a great little reminder to remind us, what they can do. The Skrulls are very dangerous, and actually in this one, and whatnot. So yeah. So then when we get to the next scene, then of course we end up seeing Gaia basically going in with the leader of the rebellion Skrull, and his name is Gravik, and he ends up telling another Skrull that he's going to take over a new body or a new host, or I think they call him a new shell. So what happens is they keep the human alive and they basically lock him up or like keep them strapped to this chamber type thing, and it has some form of like plasma or electricity or something going into their brain. So I don't really know what that does, other than the fact that it keeps them sedated and into some form of state. They don't explain that in the first episode, but I have no doubts in my mind that they will explain it eventually. To me, I feel like they'll probably go into like some form of dream-like sleep or something. I'm only guessing. Like I said, I didn't see any other episodes in this one, and they don't really explain it in this one, so I don't really know what happens. But one thing that I did really appreciate was the fact that when this scroll takes over this new host or this new shell, he's able to use his abilities to actually take the host's memory as well. And I can't quite remember in the comics if they could do that, but I'm assuming that they could, because that's the only way that they would be able to, truly make it believable that they are who they say they are, because they would have to have, the memories of the people as well. So maybe it's possible that that machine and that plasma, or electric plasma type machine that keeps them sedated, maybe that's how they're able to take their memories. Maybe like that machine can read their memories and then is transferred into the scroll. And that, of course, once again shows how dangerous the scrolls are, because not only can they take your shape, but they can also take your memories, which means they know everything about your about your past, about your loved ones, which makes them even deadlier, because, it's one thing to have to look like someone and then try to impersonate someone, but when you actually have somebody else's memories, then you're no longer having to act or having to impersonate. You actually know the truth. You actually know how they are. And I would assume you might even, to some degree, even have some feelings with that as well. Like, maybe, like, or maybe that's a question that we should be asking. Do they also have the emotion as well? So let's say if me or you were a scroll and we took over somebody else's body or somebody else's shell, or we took their shape but then also took their memories, would that mean that we also take their emotions? Does that mean that whoever that person was married to, would we really feel love for that person, or would we, just not have the emotional side but only have the memories and whatnot? So I'd be curious to see that side of it, because I really can't remember from the comics. I haven't read Secret Invasion in a really long time. Maybe I should have, or maybe I will. Maybe after this series I'll reread it. It doesn't really matter if you have read it anyways, because they do typically do things a little bit different in their adaptations. So, it will be a little bit different. The comic will be a little bit different than the show. They always do that. But anyways, once again, I thought that was a really great scene, showing once again how powerful these scrolls were. Is another great, was another way that they were able to show another type of power that the scroll has, and while showing how formidable they are and how dangerous they are. Because not only now, because we learn now, not only can they take the shape, but they can also take the memory, and they're also willing to take the memory, and they're willing to keep these humans locked up and sedated, which of course shows the menacing side of them as well. So then we end up coming back to the safe house, and we're with Talos, Nick Fury, and Maria. I think Maria's here as well, Maria Hill, and and they end up having a bunch of conversations, talking about the scrolls, talking about how they can't really trust anyone anymore, because they don't know who's a scroll, who's not a scroll. Nick Fury tells them, I think it was Nick Fury, either it was Nick or the other agent, whoever it was, and in the conversation they end up talking about how the scrolls end up taking over some of the major leaders of the world, and how we don't they're basically influencing the world. It really, to me, the vibe that I got from this, it was like a really, like a darker tone, more eerie, creepy version of like Captain America, the Winter Soldier, because the Winter Soldier was, and even Civil War to some degree, because both of those movies were very political, but specifically the Winter Soldier was very political and pretty dark as well. But I do think that this show is much darker than that, because the whole time in this show, you're constantly, it just it just doesn't feel comfortable, because sure, we see Nick Fury, sure, we see Maria Hill, sure, we see Talos, but well, Talos, I guess, really is Talos, but like we don't really know, is that really Nick Fury? Is that really Maria Hill? So it's really hard to know who is who in this show. So I think that is constantly sort of hovering over everything that we're seeing, and I think that's the whole point of Secret Invasion. Also, when you're reading the comics, even though it was a bigger, more like an Avengers level threat, you're constantly, in the back of your mind while reading, you're constantly wondering, well, is this really even this person, or is this person somebody else? And And I think that the show did a really good job at setting that up. The whole time I'm watching this, I'm constantly well, is this even really Nick Fury? Is this really even Maria Hill? Because we really don't know who's who because of how powerful these Skrulls have already become. And I like the fact that Captain Marvel did take place in the 90s, because they don't really need to explain that anymore now. They can sort of just, they don't really need to explain all that in the show now, because we already know from watching Captain Marvel that they have been here for 30 years. So I really liked like little things like that. That's one good thing about the MCU being such a connected universe, is that they can drop little tidbits and little Easter eggs like that in other projects without having to go full-blown explanation into the next project. So I really appreciated that. And so in this conversation, they're talking about how they can't trust anyone. The Skrulls have taken over power, and they have a really cool back and forth here where Talos is like, well, it's a war with Gravik, but Nick Fury is like, well, we're no longer just in a war. It's not just a war with Gravik. He's like, fully political now, and he's taken over everything and whatnot. So I just thought that was really cool. I really liked their banter and whatnot. So then we come to another scene now with Gravik and Gaia, and they're like sort of sat down, at this, I guess you could say, like this coffee shop, so to speak, and they're basically making all these plans now, because they do plan on doing, planning this terrorist attack. And so Gaia, or not Gaia, but Gravik is basically giving out, different orders to different Skrulls, telling them what they need to do, telling them, planning the stages of attacks, telling them where they're going to attack, telling them who's going to do what, and how they're going to basically go about doing it and whatnot. So I thought that was really cool. And of course, Gaia is a part of the plan, who is, like we already said, Talos's daughter. So eventually, Talos and Nick Fury and Maria Hill are eventually able to catch up with Gaia and actually sort of confront her and be like, hey, we know that there's something going down. We know that there's going to be some form of terrorist attack. And Gaia is actually really powerful as well, so she's able to subdue, well, not really subdue, but she's able to fight back against Maria Hill, and she actually beats her, because remember, Gaia is a Skrull, so she's probably a lot more powerful than humans anyways. So that happens, and they're able to, they're really able to, Gaia, I'm sorry, is really able to get away from those people and whatnot. So, but she does end up meeting up with her father, eventually, at least in the episode, and she does end up sort of reveal to him that there's going to be an attack, and they're going to attack 3 different locations with 3 different bombs and whatnot. So I really liked how she did trust Talos, and also this is when she learns, like we said, that her mom has actually passed away. She didn't know that, and I really liked the emotion. Emilia Clarke did a great job at performing as Gaia, but I don't think we suspected any less from her anyways. We know that she's a great actor, a very strong performance, and her presence is always known on screen. So I really thought she delivered that really well, those lines, and also just, when she learned about the news about her mother being passed away, I just thought that she delivered that really well, and the reactions of her, facial reactions, how she acted, I thought it was really, really accurate to real life. She legitimately didn't know. So of course, then of course we end up seeing Talos and Nick Fury. They end up catching someone that they know is a Skrull, and they end up interrogating the Skrull. And one thing that this show, that scene, I'm sorry, did really well also, is it also sort of showed once again another superpower or another ability from the Skrulls, is the fact that they're just naturally stronger than humans. So because in this fight, we see the Skrull who ends up fighting against Talos, like they're interrogating them, but then they sort of, starts to fighting, and there's an actual physical confrontation between the Skrull that's being interrogated, and of course Talos, who's in the room with Nick Fury, and you can see that the two of them are fighting against each other, and they're both extremely powerful. Talos is able to throw, that Skrull around the room, and that Skrull is able to throw Talos around the room. But the problem is with Talos is that, or at least it seems and appears as though Talos is, a lot older than a lot of the Skrulls. Seems like he's more of an elder. He's a little bit more aged, which makes me wonder if he's a little bit slower and a little bit less powerful than a lot of the other Skrulls. So they end up getting into a fight, and to the point where eventually Nick Fury is going to step in. And I thought this was a really good emotional scene as well, because it really shows Talos and his position on the Skrulls and on humanity as well, because when Nick steps in, he ends up actually shooting the Skrull, killing the Skrull, Now, he only did it because he wanted to save Talos's life, but you can see the remorse in Talos as well. You can tell that he still clings to his own race. He does, he still feels for the Skrulls, because, that is his type of, that is his life. That's how he grew up. He is a Skrull himself. So he does be very disappointed when Nick ends up shooting the Skrull. And you can tell that he almost takes the side of the Skrulls a little bit. So I really liked that part of it as well. Like, I really liked how they showed, Talos and the impact that this has on Talos. Talos, constantly told Fury during that fight not to step in, don't intervene. But then, of course, Fury intervenes anyways, which ends up, leading to the death of a Skrull, and that has an emotional impact on Talos. So I really appreciated the writing there as well, because I do think that that's very believable, and I do think that would really happen. And then right after that scene, right after that scene is actually when we get to the scene, then, of course, when Talos meets Gaia, which we already talked about. He ends up finding her, meeting up with her. She tells him that the attack is going to come. She ends up filling him in with the three bombs, and the location of the three bombs and whatnot, or the area at least where they're going to let these three bombs go and whatnot. So, but we already talked about that scene a little bit. I just got the scenes mixed up, but anyways. So after he meets Gaia and they see each other, and it's revealed to her that her mother had passed away. Then we come to another really cool scene, which seems to be like another diner where we have Nick and Maria Hill sat down. And this is actually where you get a lot of the really good banter, where Maria is like, it seems like Maria is very upset with Fury. Well, for one, he never stayed in contact with her, so that's understandable. You can see why she would be upset about that. He didn't keep in contact with her, and and she's just like, well, obviously I didn't care that much about you, or you didn't care that much about me, so to speak, because of the fact that they didn't keep in contact. So I was able to also, really appreciate that side of it as well, and I thought that was. And it's true, and she talks about how the blip changed him, and how, he's not the same Fury that he used to be and whatnot. So there is a little bit of like I said, there is a little bit of confrontation between them, but not physical, just more of an emotional, descriptive banter. But once again, you can really see the PTSD, so to speak, rubbing off on Fury. You can tell he really is a changed man, and he's not the same Fury that we've always grown to know and love. I don't know that he's a Skrull. I still feel like there's enough elements here. Like I said, this show does a really good job at making us wonder. So I don't think, at least as of right now, I don't think that he's a Skrull, but maybe he is. Like I said, I have no idea. All we know is that there's like at least 500 of them, and they're out for blood now at this point. So I don't have any. I have no idea if he is a Skrull yet. It's possible that he is. Maybe he's not. I'm not 100% sure. But either way, he is a changed man, and I think that's realistic. Even if he's not a Skrull, and it turns out that really is him, I do believe that he would have that personality. Like, I do think that he would be changed after the blip. And of course, during this conversation, basically, is when we actually get the flashback of him going in the blip. So it was a callback to Avengers Infinity War. I was under the impression that this was actually supposed to happen during the blip. I was under the impression that this was taking place in those 5 years that we sort of lost in the MCU. But it seems to me like this is happening shortly after the blip. So I would say that this was probably on the same timeline as like Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, maybe Loki Season 1. So I do feel like this is afterwards, but I still think it's modern. Like, I do think that this, chronologically in order, I do think that this would be the next, the next chapter of the MCU. And just, I think that, I just hope that we get more flashbacks to the blip. I was under the impression that the whole series takes place during the blip, but obviously it doesn't, unless this Nick Fury is a Skrull. Oh, so I never thought about that until right now. Maybe that is the possibility. Maybe Nick Fury is the Skrull, and this is taking place during the blip. That would be interesting. That would be a pretty cool way to twist and turn, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. I do think Talos and also Gaia eventually will play big roles into helping the humans be freed and whatnot. So, but anyways, we come back into Gaia and Gravik, who are carrying on and continuing on with their their preparations for this big attack. Gaia ends up reaching out to Talos, or Talos ends up reaching out to Gaia, one or the other, but they end up meeting up either way. Talos is driving this taxi cab, and he ends up picking up Maya, and they end up having the conversations, talking about the attack, and she fills him in basically. And they do have a really good bonding moment, because even though Gaia is sort of over with this, with the rebellion Skrulls now, I still thought it was really nice to see. It's still really nice to see their connection. You can still see that she does care about Talos. She obviously very much cared about her mother. She's very upset that the mother is no longer there. So I really liked how they played off of each other, and it did do a great job at showing Gaia and her heart. It did a really good job at showing that she still has a heart, and she does still care about, she still cares about her father, and she even still cares about humanity for the most part, because she's so willing and eager to actually, tell him about the attack, tell him about the location and whatnot, and tells him that it's going to happen in Russia. And I think it's Moscow, Russia as well. I'm pretty sure that's where it said it was, Moscow. And that's something else I'm going to be curious about. Like, how far are we going to go with Secret Invasion? Because, like I said, in the comics, it was a much bigger threat, or at least it felt much bigger. But, it was very much a worldwide threat, very much a worldwide, world-changing event. So now that I'm thinking about it, given the fact that episode 1 was in Russia, I do think now that this will be a very big worldwide event, because we know, I'm sure at some point they're going to come back to America, and who knows, maybe they'll go to like Australia, Canada, who knows where they'll go, but going to be very interesting to see where all the locations that they end up going to. It'd be cool if each episode was in a new location, but it seems like the Skrulls' hideout are here in Russia. Seems like this is where they're doing everything. So after Gaia tells everyone about the attack, tells her father, Talos, about the plan and about the terrorist attack, then of course Talos obviously is going to fill in for everybody else, and, because they want to obviously prevent this from happening. They don't want a bunch of people dying. So they end up going now to the location where all the bombs are going to go off. And even this whole sequence I thought was really creepy, especially when there's a scene when Nick Fury ends up seeing one of the Skrulls, which I actually think was Gravik. I could be wrong, so correct me if I am wrong. But I think that he ended up seeing Gravik, and Gravik was sort of disguised as like this little child with like a big rainbow ball or balloon or something like that. But the way that they stared at each other was just so like, it was very intense. It was very, you could feel the gravity of the stare. But anyways, Fury and Maria and Talos are here, and they're trying to figure out where all the bombs are. And one thing I did think was really cool is that they did have really cool technology, because I was wondering, like, if they're not going to have superheroes, so to speak, in the show, like the Avengers are not going to be in here, maybe with the exception, of course, of Rhodey. Like, how are they going to be able to fight against these Skrulls? Like, will they end up, because technically Fury is from Sword, or it seems like Sword is now exists. So he's, working with Sword. He was also with the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So I was very curious about, like, how would they be able to do, like, fight against with, these Skrulls without any superpowers. So I do like how they utilize the technology. The three of them have these glasses which are, able to basically have like this X-ray type thing, and, they're following all the people using this sort of, it's not really X-ray, I guess you could say is more like a thermal glasses, I guess you would say. But anyways, the glasses are able to read who has the bombs and whatnot, so they go around the square. They're trying to find out who is a Skrull, who is not a Skrull, and they're really trying to follow the bombs to stop it. And I really like the sequence with Gravik, because it seems like Fury was the one that was following Gravik, which will make sense because Fury is sort of like the leader of this sort of operation now, even though he's being overlooked by that special agent. But you get what I'm saying. Fury is sort of like the leader of this group, and then of course Gravik is the leader of the Rebellion Skrulls. So I really liked how they had it, how they wrote it into the fact that it was Fury that actually found Gravik, and that whole sequence of him following Gravik is constantly changing shape, changing form. It was just really, really creepy. Once again, giving you that overwhelming feeling that you can't trust anybody that you're seeing. You can't even trust the people that are here. This might not really be Fury. It might not really be Maria Hill. It might not really be, well, I guess it would have to be Talos, because Talos wouldn't turn into anybody other than himself. Well, not necessarily. Maybe it's not Talos. Maybe another Skrull took the form of Talos, to go undercover, so to speak. I have no doubts in my mind that one of them are a Skrull. I do think either Fury, Maria Hill, or Talos is actually a Skrull, like a rebel Skrull. I do think that their team will be infiltrated somehow. I think, and after. Well, we'll get into that in a second. Actually, let's just finish the scene by scene breakdown. So the bombs end up going off, and this is when the big shocker comes. Fury ends up finding Gravik, and of course he's chasing Gravik. He's following Gravik, and then out of nowhere, we see Fury end up meeting up with Maria Hill, and then she ends up getting shot because it turns out that it's actually not Fury. And it's actually Gravik, and she ends up dying, or appears to have died. Maybe she won't actually be dead. This is the MCU. They can bring her back with advanced technologies, or just simply say that this was a different version. But she did get shot, and then the real Fury comes over and sees Maria Hill lying there bleeding out, and that's essentially pretty well how the show ends. But once again, it shows the formidable force of the Skrulls, how crazy they are, just how evil they are, but also how smart and organized and intelligent and powerful they are, and just the gravity of the Skrulls in general. So, like I said, even though this is a huge worldwide Avengers level threat in the comics, I did think that this show did a great job at setting them up and really showing, even in this more well-grounded story, just how formidable the Skrulls really are. And I absolutely loved this episode. I thought episode 1, this, in my opinion, which really means nothing, is very subjective, so, my opinion obviously is biased. But in my opinion, I do think that this was probably one of the strongest pilot shows that we've had in a long time for any Marvel opening. With the exception of like the Netflix stuff. Like, I thought Daredevil had a really good opening. I thought Punisher had a really good opening. WandaVision was very compelling in the beginning. Obviously, Moon Knight. I think Moon Knight was absolutely awesome as well. The opening for the pilot of the show, I mean. But I think that Secret Invasion probably had one of the strongest pilots that we've seen so far in terms of Disney and Disney Plus. So I really, really liked that episode, and I absolutely loved it. I have no doubts in my mind that Special Agent Falsworth, who's sort of the ones that are sort of like the resources to Fury's team here, like the government side of things, I have no doubts that she'll play a much bigger role as time goes on. I know for a fact, I mean, we know after this episode, Gaia is going to play a big role. Obviously, Talos, the rebel Skrull leader, Gravik, he's going to be huge. Pagan is going to be a big character in this one, so obviously Fury will be as well. So the fact that I already know that in the credits, Colby Smulders is credited to be in all 6 episodes, so I do believe that she's either going to survive this gunshot, or maybe this was not really her. Maybe this was a Skrull version of her. But all in all, I really, really liked the first episode. So I thought this was a very strong pilot, very strong opening. And I do feel like this show is not going to be for everyone, because it is a much slower, show, a Marvel show. It doesn't have the crazy superheroes. It doesn't have the crazy action that a lot of superhero shows has. But I do think, this is much more of a political sort of slow burner type show, but honestly is right up my alley. For one, I love slow burners anyways. One of my favorite Netflix shows was season 1 of Bloodline, and that was an extremely slow burner, so I'm a big fan of slow burners, especially political thrilling slow burners like this one. So I really liked the pilot. I thought it was a great job. Thought they did a great job with this one. I just hope that they can keep the momentum. I hope that it's not like the typical Disney Plus show where it's going to be loses momentum after 2 or 3 episodes. There's only 6 episodes anyways, and so if this is any indication, then I think we're in for a real treat. But like I said, I won't believe that until I see all the episodes, but I'm okay with the slow burner. But now, theorizing, let's make a couple crazy theories before we end the episode. What do we think will happen in the future? I think that there's a big possibility that maybe Nick Fury is a Skrull. I do think that. I think that Maria is probably going to be a Skrull. And I'm thinking that maybe even Rhodey could end up being a Skrull, just because, Rhodey is pretty well the only true Avenger that's going to be in here. I do think that potentially Rhodey will be a Skrull. I don't really know so much about Fury yet. If he's not a Skrull right now, I do think he will become a Skrull. And actually, if he does become a Skrull, I kind of hope that they show that sequence. I would like it'd be cool if they show Fury get kidnapped by the Rebellion Skrulls. It'd be cool if they showed him hooking, showed the Skrulls hooking him up to that plasma thing, taking his memories and then becoming him. So I think that would be a cool to see that actually happen. Or they could have it so that he's already a Skrull, and then we see the flashback of how he became a Skrull. So either way, I'd be pretty happy with that. But I do think that that at least one, if not two of them in that team between Falsworth, Talos, Fury, and Maria, and maybe even Gaia, I do think that one of them will be a Skrull that works for the Rebellion of the Skrulls. I just hope that they don't go as far as saying, well, everybody's a Skrull. Like, I hope not everybody's a Skrull, because then I feel like that would, even though that would be, like, extremely, it'd be crazy if they did go that far and be like, oh, wow, like, what happened to the real dudes? Where's the real Nick Fury? Where's the real Maria Hill? I just hope that they don't go that far to the point where they're all Skrulls, because we still need to have somewhat of a hero. Like, if they're all Skrulls, and who's going to be willing to help them? And now you can make a fair argument and say, well, Gaia and Talos would help them. And that's true, but we've already seen Talos have a pretty emotional impact after Fury killed the other Skrull. And not only that, but I just don't think it would be believable enough for Gaia and Talos to be able to take on the whole Skrull rebellion on their own. At least with Fury, he has the resources. Maria Hill has the resources, thanks to Special Agent Sonya Falsworth. I do think that she's probably going to be a Skrull. If she's not already, I do think she will become one. But I think she's already a Skrull, and I think she's probably a good Skrull that's helping Talos. Part of me wonders if maybe Talos might not even be in on the invasion as well. I could see that coming. I could see Talos maybe become having it revealed that Talos was actually in on it the whole time as well. So I could see that happening too, and I would not be surprised. And it could turn out where Gaia really will end up being the true hero. I hope Gaia sticks around. I really like Emilia Clarke's performance and her interpretation of the character. I think she plays really good off of Ben Mendelsohn as Talos, and I think she will play off really good from Maria Hill and Nick Fury and everything. So I do think that eventually they will totally bring her over to the good side, but I just hope that, I would like to see Gaia stick around. It would be cool to see her continue her story in the MCU, and why not? Why can't we have one superhero that's a Skrull, And I think that she would really fit that role really good. I mean, because Talos is sort of already a superhero, but why not have it so that Talos' daughter is as well? So I think that's really cool. But anyways, I think that for me at least, my working theories moving forward is that Nick Fury either is or will be a Skrull already. I have no doubts that Maria Hill is a Skrull, or at least she will survive this gunshot. And I think that a part of me do think that Talos, we will learn as the future goes on that Talos is in on it somehow. He might not be full-blown evil, but I do think that he's probably in it somehow, or maybe he planted the idea or something. I do think he's connected to the invasion somehow, beyond the fact that he's just a Skrull. And I think that Gaia will become good totally, and maybe even make some big moves. Maybe she'll help, maybe she'll expose the Skrull leader, Gravik. Maybe she'll expose them or dig up evidence on something that would really, pinpoint, the governments and whatnot. I do think that most of the world leaders at this point will be Skrulls. I think it'd be pretty cool if they went back even further or something somehow and said that, maybe like Hydra has always been led by the Skrulls, or, that group that was in Captain America and Winter Soldier, what were they called? The Red Hand or something, or the Hand? It'd be cool to see that they were led by the Skrulls. So they have the opportunity to really have even more connectivity to the MCU by just going back through all phase 1, 2, and 3 and just saying that it was the Skrulls really that were doing it all. They could say that the Skrulls were maybe the ones that manipulated the 10 rings or something like that. So I think it would be pretty cool to see all that, or at least everybody in Hydra. Maybe, yeah, because I wouldn't want to take away from the 10 rings. The other characters are still important too. But maybe if they said that everybody in Hydra were Skrulls, I think that would be pretty cool. Agent Simmons, I think that was his name, Simmons. He could have been a Skrull and whatnot. So I think they have the opportunity to do a lot of really cool stuff with the Skrulls, and I hope they do. I hope they tap into a lot with Secret Invasion. I hope they do go right back to Phase 1 and sort of show where certain Skrulls started to sort of take over certain positions. I think that would be really cool, and I think it would be really cool to see Be cool to see a little bit about the Skrulls and the Kree as well. Be cool to see if we see any, any confrontation between the Skrulls and the Kree, because we know in the comics that they are at war as well. So all in all, I think it's going to be exciting to see where this series goes. And like I said before, I absolutely loved the first episode. I loved the pilot, and I do absolutely think that we're in for a treat as long as it keeps up the momentum. Now, I do know that there were a lot of people that already have access, or at least have already seen episode 2 of Secret Invasion, and they all seem to say the same thing, that episode 2 was equally as good as the pilot and ends on a cliffhanger just like episode 1. So can't wait to see it. And all in all, absolutely loved episode 1 of Secret Invasion, which was titled Resurrection. So that's all I got for you for this podcast. This is basically our after show, which we'll be doing for each of the episodes of Secret Invasion. So if you haven't seen Secret Invasion, go check it out. And if you want, tune in each week to listen to our after show. This is the All Things Watch podcast, and this is where we will be talking all things in open spoiler discussion formats. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, follow along if you want. Click the follow button, follow the podcast, and check out the YouTube channel, All Things Watched. If you like what you hear and see, then click subscribe on the channel and follow the podcast and all that good stuff. And that's all I got for you. So let me know what your thoughts were of Secret Invasion episode 1. I loved it. Let me know in the comment section down below. And until the next podcast or the next video, take care.